Now to do the vertical line test to check that whether it is a function or not. Vertical line test. What we do in vertical line test, a vertical line passes through the graph of a function to check that whether it is a function or not. It is a kind of test where we pass a vertical line to the graph of any function in a sense to check that whether it is a function or not. But how we do this, let me tell you. If the vertical line passes through a single point of the graph of a function, then it is called a function. But if the vertical line passes through more than one point, then it is not a function. This is the condition. If a vertical line touches the graph once at a single point, then it is a function. I have no issue. But in case if the vertical line touches the graph more than once, twice or thrice, then it is not a function. You cannot say that it is a function. Vertical line must touches the graph only at a single point if you look for any function. That's what we do in the vertical line test. Let me show you how to do the vertical line test on the graph of a function. This is my x-plane. This is my y-plane. If I have a graph, it is a straight line. I'm gonna pass vertical lines on different points to check that whether it is a function or not. Let me start from here, and then here, and then here, finally here. When you look to the graph, all the vertical lines touch the graph only once at single points. It touches the graph only at this stage. The second one touches here, the third one touches here, and the last one touches here. As we know that as long as the vertical line passes through a single point of the graph, then it is a function. But if the line passes through more than one point on the graph, then it is not a function. Right over here, I have no issue at all. The line passes through the single point separately. So it is a function. It is a perfect function. That's what we do in the vertical line test. Let me give one more example. This is my x-plane. Here is my y-plane. If I have a function which is a piecewise function, this is a piecewise function. Let me pass the vertical lines through the graph that whether it is a function or not. When I pass a line from here, I have no issue because the line only touches once. But when I pass here, it looks like that it touches the graph on 2 points. But actually it is not true. Line through this point has no problem because it touches the line only once. All the lines touches the graph at 1 point. All the vertical lines pass through the graph at single points. So I have no issue at all. Because look, it is a hole. The line passes freely through the hole without touching it. It does not touch the graph at this point. It passes freely through this hole and touches here only. It touches the graph at this point only. So I can say that this vertical line touches the graph at a single point, which is here. Not here. It is a hole. It passes through the hole without touching this piece of the graph. So I'm absolutely fine with this line. Therefore, I can say that it is a function. It is a perfect function. It satisfies the vertical line test. If I take one more example, this is my x-plane, x-axis. This is my y-plane, y-axis. I have another piecewise function. It is a piecewise function. It has 2 pieces. Let me pass the vertical lines. When I pass the vertical lines here, I'm absolutely fine because it touches the graph at 1 point. But if I pass it here, I have problem because it touches the graph at 2 points. It touches both pieces of the graph. But when I pass it here, it passes through a single point. So with the 2 vertical lines, I have no problem. The left and the right vertical lines, because they touches the graph only at single points. I have issue with the vertical line in the middle. Because look, it is a filled in circle. Here is a filled in circle. So this vertical line touches here and then touches here. It touches the graph on more than 1 point. Remember, in previous example, we had an empty circle. So I had no issue because the line was passing freely without touching the graph. But right over here, I have filled in circle. It touches the graph at this point, then going down all the way and touches it here again. Since from the definition we had learned that the vertical line should not touch the graph on more than 1 point. Therefore, it does not satisfy the vertical line test. So it is not a function. I cannot say that it is a function. It does not satisfy the vertical line test because the middle vertical line touches the graph here and then here. Remember, during vertical line test, if only a single vertical line touches the graph more than one point, then it is not a function. It is not necessary that all the vertical lines should touch the graph more than one point, then it is not a function. No, it is not the case. If a single vertical line passes through more than one single point, still it is not a function. You cannot say that it is a function. One more example. This is my x-axis plane and this is my y-axis plane. If I have a function which is a sine wave, let me pass the vertical lines. When I pass the vertical lines at different stages, look to the graph. All the vertical line touches the graph at single points. So I'm absolutely fine here because it satisfies the vertical line test. There is not a single vertical line which touches the graph on more than one point. Therefore, I can say that it is a function. It satisfies the vertical line test. Let me take one more example here. If I have another piecewise function, let me pass the vertical lines through the graph of this piecewise function. A line through this stage has no issue at all because it touches the graph only once, and here no problem. It touches only once. Here no issue at all. It touches the graph at a single point. Similarly here, I have no problem. When you look to these three vertical lines, they touch the graph at single points. But what about this line? It does not touch the graph at any point. No problem at all, as long as the vertical line does not touch the graph on more than one point. Whether the vertical line passes through single point or whether it passes through the graph without touching the graph, I have no problem. I only get problem when the line touches the graph on more than one point, like it touches the graph twice or thrice. Then I have problem, otherwise I have no issue. So it satisfies the vertical line test here, and therefore it is a perfect function. It is a function. But what about if I have another function here? Let me pass the vertical line through different stages. When you look at here, at these stages, the vertical lines are passing through single points. I have no problem here at all. But the problem that I have is here. This line passes through multiple points. It is not a single point. This line passes through this whole region of the graph. This region has multiple points. It does not satisfy the vertical line test here. The vertical line test is failed here. Therefore, I can say that it is not a function. You cannot say that it is a function because the middle vertical line passes through more than one point. Let me take one more example here. If I have a function where its graph is in this shape, let me pass the vertical lines. Look, all the vertical lines touches the graph only once at these points. It satisfies the vertical line test, so it is a function. It is a perfect function. One more example here. If I have a parabola, what's gonna happen here? Let me pass the vertical lines. It is easy. It's pretty easy to identify that whether it is a function or not. It is pretty clear from here that all the vertical lines touch the graph only once at these points. So I'm absolutely fine. It satisfies the vertical line test. Therefore, it is a function. One more example here. But what if I have a circle? Is it a function or not? Let me try the vertical line test. When I pass the vertical lines at different points, all the vertical lines touch the graph of the circle twice at these points. This line coming from here, it touches the graph at this point and then going down all the way to touch it again. Similarly, this line, it touches here and then on another point. So is the third one. It touches the graph at this point and then going down to touch it again at this stage. So all the vertical lines touches the graph at 2 points. It does not satisfy the vertical line test. Vertical line test is failed here. Therefore, it is not a function. I cannot say that it is a function. What if I have a rightward parabola? It's a rightward parabola. Let me pass the vertical lines to the graph at different points. Again, when you look to the graph, all the vertical lines touch the graph twice at these points. It touches here and then here. The second one touches here and then at the lower end. The third one also touches here and then at this point. Therefore, it does not satisfy the vertical line test. So I can say that it is not a function. Let me give one more example. If I have a function where its graph is in this shape, now to check that whether it is a function or not, I'm going to pass the vertical lines. Let me pass the lines at different stages. It does not satisfy the vertical lines because it is pretty clear from here that this vertical line touches the graph here and then here. It touches the graph twice. I have no issue with the other two vertical lines, but I have issue with this one. It does not satisfy the vertical line test because it touches the graph at 2 points. So it is not a function. But what if I have a function where its graph is in this shape? Let me check that whether it is a function or not. If I pass the vertical lines, look to the graph, all the vertical lines pass through multiple points. This line touches the graph here and then the third point and then the fourth point. So it touches this graph on 4 points. Similarly, this one, it touches here and then on the second point, on the third point, and finally on the fourth point. It touches the graph at 4 stages. It fails the vertical line test here, and therefore it is not a function. There was the vertical line test on the continuous graph of a function.